In the last lesson, we spoke about the vanishing point perspective in the Middle Age, the first attempts to afford vanishing point perspective. Now, in this lesson, we will be in the full knowledge of vanishing point perspective, and we will see how different painters during the Italian Renaissance were able to create wonderful masterpieces following perfectly these rules. The first masterpiece I would like to speak about is this incredible fresco by Masolino da Panicale, 1424-1425. The name is Healing of the Cripple and Raising of Tabitha. You can find it in Cappella Brancacci in Santa Maria del Carmine in Florence. And remember, every time I'm telling you about some masterpiece, some painting or some fresco, it would be very nice if you try to deepen all this kind of information in the internet or through books and so on. It's always very, very important. It is my first advice to deepen all the things that I am telling you. In this case, you can see a very mature masterpiece where the vanishing point perspective and all the rules of this kind of linear perspective have been perfectly applied to the masterpiece, to the work. For example, in this case, architecture is helping us always very, very well to find the vanishing point perspective and to feel that the perspective is very well represented. So if we take the different lines in this painting, we can discover the structure that is hidden behind all the paintings. You see, we can find exactly the vanishing point here, and you see the same vanishing point is possible to be found also, for example, following the lines in this street. Seems to be less important in the general composition, but still also in this case, all these lines are converging towards this vanishing point, just one vanishing point. If you draw an horizontal line passing through this vanishing point, you can find the horizon of this structure. In the same way, you can also find that is a typical representation with just one vanishing point perspective. We will speak later also about perspective where we have two vanishing points. But here, typically, there's only one vanishing point. So all the element, all the wall or the facades that are parallel to the viewers are exactly parallel to the viewers without another kind of vanishing point on another kind of converging line system. At this point, it is very easy to find the horizon here in this image. You already know it. It's enough to draw an horizontal line passing by the vanishing point, the unique vanishing point you can find in this masterpiece, where it's not possible to see actually the horizon, but the structure is, of course, hidden behind all these facades and the architecture represented here. In the same time, you can realize that there is only one vanishing point here in this structure. In particular, all the facades and all the architecture that are parallel to the viewer's eyes are just parallel without other kind of converging lines to another kind of vanishing point perspective or so. So we have just a very simple structure where all the lines are running towards this infinite, very far vanishing point. If we want to observe better this image, we can realize, of course, that every single element is ruled by the vanishing point perspective structure. For example, we can see that this character in foreground is much bigger than the characters in the background, and they are ruled by the same structure because they are standing on parallel lines, parallel horizon, and more these lines are close to the viewer, the more these characters are bigger. In this case, you also realize how important is architecture to sublime this perspective effect, because architectures with different planes and the very vertical lines, because all the vertical lines are always very vertical, helps us to feel this perspective. Remember, you don't have any kind of vertical line that is a little bit out or leaning from this vertical structure. Everything is based on the parallel lines of the horizon and the vertical lines of the walls and columns and pillars and so on. And of course, also characters are based on different kind of vertical lines. The Holy Trinity by Masaccio is a perfect example of what is the use of vanishing point perspective with one point. In this case, you can see that all the lines in this wonderful architecture are going to find one point that is corresponding with the base of the entire construction, the entire structure. The horizon is just corresponding to the base, to the floor, and then we can find the different converging lines to this vanishing point that's here. And if you go on with all these lines that you can see also here, and so on, so on, so on, you can go on, and you will find that the structure is describing a very deep architecture with different layers, where Christ is in the middle of the composition, just like also God, that is the Father that is behind him. And so there's a hierarchy, a structure that is used not just to describe a space, but also the value of the different protagonists of this painting. It's very important to use perspective not just to describe space, but also to give a different importance to different protagonists, different characters of this composition. This is, of course, a very mature result of vanishing point perspective, and it will be always a perfect example. And in particular, this work has been perceived by the contemporaries as something very impressive for them. This was the first time when a painting was able to give exactly the perception of depth. So it was like to go beyond the wall and to see a real space. It was very impressive for the people of that time. In this case, Paolo Uccello in 1470 used the same perspective structure, but without architecture. And he was able, in this hunting scene, to describe the depth of this forest just by showing the different elements in different size. For example, people in foreground are bigger, and so the dogs, and so also the different trees. By going away, by going in depth, you see that everything is going to be smaller. It's a very simple idea. This is just a part of the painting by Paolo Uccello. It is just the part where you can find the vanishing point. If you follow the basis of these trees, you can find a point that is over there in the horizon, more or less on this tree, and the horizon is at this level over there. Of course, is hidden under this black background, the black of the forest or the deep forest. And it is just another attempt to give the idea, to produce the idea of depth without using architecture. But still here, just like columns or pillars, all these trees are standing in a perfectly vertical way, because the vanishing point perspective structure is based on this kind of grid. So you have always something very vertical. It helps a lot to produce this idea of depth. So time and technique were so mature now that it was possible to reproduce the quality and the characteristic of a space, even a natural space, without very strong architectural references. And it was possible so to reach very good results. We come back to architecture now, because in this wonderful masterpiece by Piero della Francesca, The Flagellation of Christ, we can see how, once again, vanishing point perspective is very well described by architecture, but in particular, there is something that begins to evolve better. In this case, the artist used the structure of vanishing point perspective not just to describe two different kinds of places, like an urban street, an urban view, and an interior, as you can see on the left. But he uses two different shots, two different parts of this perspective to sublime two different moments in time, because in particular this mysterious work, it is not so clear today what is the real meaning of this word. There are many hypotheses. If you are interested, you can find out in the internet or in many books a lot of information about this work, but it seems that the part on the left is speaking about a past time, and the part on the right is speaking about a contemporary time. The use of perspective is going to be finer and finer, because artists realize that this is not just a geometrical instrument, but also a very powerful tool to speak about the subject they are interested about.